you, sir. Thank you very much. Hello friends, welcome to Nammerica. My name is Anand Rao. I recently had the opportunity to meet with my good friend, a prolific writer and a senior journalist, Chidananda Rajghatta, whose third book, Phenomenal Woman Kamala Harris, is published and available on Amazon now. Chidu has been a US correspondent for the Times of India for a very long time. He's the author of The Horse That Flew, a book about the rise of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and Illiberal India, the story of Gauri Lankesh. Chidu has been featured before in America, and I'm happy to welcome him back to talk about his latest book, Phenomenal Woman Kamala Harris. I just finished reading this book and I can't wait to hear from him. Hello, Chidu. Thank you very much for joining me. It's a pleasure meeting you again, twice in 2 weeks. So this is very good. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Pleasure is all mine. We met, I guess, here in Washington.
Yep.
Washington last week, and now we are in your den, I guess. You and your den and mine.
We are in our respective dens. So yes, as promised, I read your fabulous work, Phenomenal Woman Kamala Harris. It's it's very, very interesting. It's what struck me immediately was the glut of information in this. And you bring in so many people in this. There's so many names, many of which I had to look up, and it's probably one of the most heavily named books I have read. As in, I get to meet so many different people in one page. You bring in hundreds of different names. So how did it happen? To me, it appeared like you were building the narrative in this book around the characters.
It's primarily a theme-driven book. I mean, Kamala is, of course, the central character, but it also deals with, say, the office of the vice presidency, which is a very interesting office, as I've explained. I mean, there's one chapter in the book on the office itself and the people who occupied that office, and that examines, the office and how it developed. Because for the longest time, a vice president in the U.S. was very inconsequential. There were all kinds of disreputable characters who were vice presidents. They did not even have a home in Washington, D.C. for the longest time, till about 50 years ago. Many of them, were accommodated purely for political reasons, and some of them were, they were drunkards, scoundrels, all kinds of characters. So yeah, in that sense, the book is filled with characters, but it's more about the office of the vice president.
It's very interesting because what the sense I got was, yes, this is about Kamala Harris, but it's also equally about the situation around Kamala Harris. The driving forces that made Kamala Harris the person that she is. You talk a lot about the limited opportunities women had, and you speak at length about racism and sexism, and these, whether we appreciate it or not, or acknowledge it or not, are major factors that led to the growth of Kamala Harris as a person.
Right. Yeah. So there is again another chapter on women in politics, and then a chapter on the Senate and women in the Senate. For instance, I mean, it's only now that a quarter of the U.S. Senate, and for that matter, entire U.S. Congress, including the House of Representatives, is about 26% women. But for the longest time, women were very scarce in the Senate and in the House. In fact, I discovered that the Senate did not have a women's restroom till very recently. Women had to trek a long way to use restroom facilities. So yeah, in that sense, I've examined how difficult it has been for women. I mean, remember, this is a country, 240 plus years, 45 presidents, all men, 44 of them white male. So it's it's been very difficult. There are, of the about 200 countries, almost a third of countries across the world, 60 plus, have had female presidents or prime ministers. We have female executive at the top. But not the United States, right? And it has looked so distant for the longest time. Hillary Clinton came very close to it in 2016. By rights, in any normal circumstances under normal rules, she should have been the president. But this country still runs on the archaic electoral college system, which deprived her of presidency. And so, Kamala is now, like they say, a heartbeat away. It's been a tough struggle. Whether she ascends, the topmost office is still, doubtful, given the extent of patriarchy in the system, which continues to exist to this day. So yes, the book examines, the struggle, the journey of women to the top office in the United States.
One thing I noticed while I was reading the book is it's very easily, it could have been made into a story from a first person point of view. It never comes from Chidu. It never comes from Chidananda Rajghatta. It's almost like a chronicle from a third person's perspective. Was that the way you intended it to be?
Yeah, like I said, very much, because this is strictly, I would say it's more than just a biography. A biography would have centered around, the person. But I think it was important to examine, like I said, the journey of, women in politics, also the office of the vice president, and most of all, the immigrant story. So if you notice, it has 2 chapters on Kamala's mother, Shyamala Gopalan, because she was truly a remarkable woman. And, for a 19-year-old Iyer girl from Delhi to journey to the US in the 50s, when very few Indian students came here, and even fewer women actually came to the US. So to study the immigrant journey, how she actually, went, integrated into the American system, into American society, developed as a researcher and scientist here, and brought up, 2 girls literally as a single mom. Because she and her husband, Kamala's dad, Donald Harris, they separated and divorced when the girls were still 6 and 4, and they pretty much grew up under her with her mom. So that itself was a remarkable story. So yeah, there are many strands in the book. Kamala is, of course, front and center this thing, but it's a larger story of immigration, of politics, of gender, and American society, as it has developed today, which a diverse, multicultural society, currently at odds with, a lot of nativist upsurge in the US.
Yeah, Chidu, your first book was The Horse That Flew. It was about the rise of Indians in the Silicon Valley. And your second book was about Gauri Lankesh, titled The Illiberal India. And this is the third book, which I asked you why when we met, and you told me that it shouldn't come as a surprise because I've covered American politics for almost all my life. What was your initial motivation in approaching her as the subject?
Well, obviously, it was she's very unusual. I mean, this is a woman of Indian origin, Black and Indian origin, who's come up the hard way through the American political system. You have to remember that she won two offices before she became vice president in elections that were statewide. California is a big state; it has a 40 million population, which is as large as Canada. And she won the office of Attorney General, statewide office, and as a senator. So I think it examines her political journey, but it also examines her immigrant roots, the story of her mother and how, the girls grew up. It also examines, Black politics and, because that is her primary ecosystem. So it's several stories in one. When I started writing this book, I intended it as a biography, but I also thought it made sense to examine the current political system and the office which she occupies, how that developed, and her career record. So I had there were simply several strands, and I examined it both from the perspective of my own reporting as a journalist in Washington, D.C., but I also wanted to introduce her to a larger audience across the world, particularly in India, where there was a lot of interest about her Indian roots.
Did it ever occur to you that you may end up writing things which have already been written about? Because that would definitely be a fear.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there is a lot of information which is known, no doubt about it. But I mean, obviously, I couldn't exclude it. But there's also a lot of new discoveries I made, which surprised me, which I had not read anywhere. Or
there is absolutely a lot of new information and things that, in fact, when I picked up this book and started to read, my intention was, okay, I'm sure there will be a lot of things which I have heard about or read about somewhere else which would be here. But though it was there from a different perspective, and it threw more light on the subject. It was in more detail. Just to give an idea, your epilogue ends at page 258, and from 258 all the way to page 318, so that's about 60 pages. It's just notes, references, and it's index, and it's the so it's the whole lot of references that suggests that you did enormous amounts of research to write this book.
Yeah, I mean, I did have to look through a lot. I mean, the book could have been 600 pages or 800 pages, but I wanted to keep it compact and convey the essence of the person and the time. So yes, I mean, there is a lot of research involved. A biography also, it can be an unending process. I could have worked on this for 5 years, and made it 3 volumes. But you've got to draw a line somewhere. It was a year-long project. That's what I set out to do, and drew a line there. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of new information, and there's stuff which is also known. Our political record, for instance, it's fairly well chronicled.
And I did ask you when we met, Chidu, that you mentioned you did not meet Kamala Harris for this. Why? You felt that it would probably dilute the experience of the book, or did she not?
Really. Yeah, no, I tried, and no, it was in fact funny that we should be talking now, because I'm just coming back from meeting her uncle.
Okay.
Her mother's brother, who is visiting DC. He actually got here yesterday. And her niece actually lives just a couple of minutes away from me. So we just met for coffee. But I did try, but it was a difficult time, because it was the middle of the election campaign. And I don't think, they had the time and the bandwidth for it. And it was also the middle of the pandemic. So it was a tough call for them. And also, I mean, I decided that I should press on regardless. There were a lot of, in fact, fact-checking issues which I wanted to clear with them, but it was difficult to get through. But the book project went ahead regardless. I did speak to a lot of her, associates, people around her, including her family, like I said just now. Bala, her uncle, is not only a think tank person who has actually dealt with US-India relations for a long time. He's also a former journalist who used to work for the Hindu, who I've known for some time. There were a lot of secondary sources too.
That's a hypothetical question. If you had met with her, let's assume that you had a lot of time to spend with her and take her personal inputs in the book, do you think the way this book was written and the way it's structured would have changed anyhow?
Possibly, I don't know. It's
probably there. My guess is there would have been a big section in the book with your personal experience of meeting her.
There probably would have been a more personal touch of encounters. I would have allowed to watch her cook, for instance. There's a whole chapter on her foodiness, and of course, there would have been a lot more, personal color in that sense. But the overall theme, I don't think would have changed, because I decided, once I got my teeth into the story, I said, okay, this is something I have to explain in terms of women, gender, politics. It would have been nice to hear her speaking about it. She's spoken about it publicly, and I've quoted a lot of what she said. But I would have liked to ask her, more personal experiences in politics. For instance, she spent only 4 years in the Senate, not even a full term. And I'm sure she encountered a lot of, misogyny and patriarchy in the Senate. The Senate is famous for that over generations. But I would have liked to hear from her what her experiences were in the Senate. and dealing with white male patriarchs.
In fact, you bring a very interesting equivalence in the book through Geraldine Ferraro. There's a point. There's a chapter where you talk extensively about her speech, and compare that to Kamala's speech, and then you say, it very well it could have been Kamala speaking on that day.
I did not cover that election campaign in the US. That was 84. These are mostly out of from archival material, but let's understand that women have striven to rise in US politics for a long time. I've referred extensively to Shirley Chisholm, who was Kamala's idol in many ways, and a contemporary of probably Kamala's mother, a black woman who ran for president, got nowhere. Geraldine Ferraro was the first nominee sort of a major political party to run in 84. And women have always thrived, and they've been balked because the system is so overwhelmingly male-dominated, white male-dominated. And it wasn't until, as we all know, Barack Obama broke through that the US had its first non-white president, and now first a non-white vice president. But otherwise, this is entrenched white male patriarchy for 200 plus years. So anybody, any female candidate who aspired to high office would have spoken in similar terms. And it was only, in 2000 after Obama that you got the sense that, all right, now the US is ready for, a non-white executive at the highest level. It is, but you are also starting to see the pushback now, with Trump and post-Trump. There is this nativist pushback. So this is a country, where this struggle is being played out between white, non-white, male, female. But the U.S. media society is not used to seeing a woman in high office. So a lot of coverage is about how she, flubs lines, how she, or what she's wearing or not wearing, her. I don't know what she shops. I saw a story that she went shopping for Thanksgiving and she bought pots and pans worth $400. Ridiculous stuff like that. So a lot of coverage is negative. It sort of reeks of sexism, gender bias. But yeah, she gets a lot of press, but not enough about the work part of it.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And one more thing I missed reading about in the book, which I thought would have probably been important, is Kamala stands on the Israel and Palestine issue, which was spoken about heavily during the elections and before that. Do you have any thoughts on why you kept that out of the book?
Not really. There were things that a lot of things that I did not include. Like I said, you have to draw lines somewhere. I did not think it was particular. Her pronouncements on foreign policy, I did not go deep into it. Some of it is still developing because she's not been a foreign policy person. Actually, she's pretty domestic. A lot of, the focus of her career work has largely been, legal and law enforcement areas, not foreign policy. Like I said, even in the Senate, she was more, in the House Judiciary Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee work. Foreign policy is not her domain. Only now, actually, in office, she's suddenly been interested with a lot of foreign. She was out in Mexico, her first trip. Then she went to repair, damage with France. So only now she's coming into her own. So no, I did not examine her foreign policy credentials extensively. For that matter, even with regards to India, she's been fairly restrained. She doesn't talk a lot about U.S.-India relations in the foreign policy domain.
Yeah, because during the run-up to the elections, that was something which was a rage on social media. People were discussing about whether she was pro-India or anti-India or pro-Israel and anti-Palestine, whatever. And so there were, but the funny part was...
I can tell you one thing. She's pro-America. As are most American politicians.
The funny part is I saw a lot of these exchanges on social
Yeah.
media there would be people talking about both sides. There was one side that was saying that she is very, very pally with the Islamists, and there was another group saying that, oh, she is so anti-Palestine, she is so
Yeah.
pro-Israel, and so and these guys would never be
Like
able to look at each other right
social
in the
media is like stepping into a sewage, my friend. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's I really enjoyed reading the book because talking about the prose of it, it is so like I mentioned in one of my posts, it's lucid prose. It just flows very beautifully. And you've been a prolific writer, Chidu. You've written for years and years for the for the print medium, and you're also the social medium, and just your Facebook posts is probably a lot more than many people's career of writing. But you mentioned to me when we met that this was one of the hardest challenges for you as a writer. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, simply because it came in the middle of pandemic, if you remember. I mean, which is still going on. But the project began, at the height of the pandemic. And it was a nightmare. There was good and bad about it. The good part was because of the pandemic, everything shut down, so it gave me blocks of time. But those blocks of time came only when I had my kids, not at home, and they went to visit their grandmother. But otherwise, they were home all the time with no school or distance education. And I'm managing, my wife and I are managing 3 kids and their online learning, which leaves you with a very sort of disrupted sense of organization. But it also, of course, inhibited a lot of personal interaction. You can't meet, you couldn't for a long time. There was nobody met anybody. We were all in these bubbles. So it was a very difficult time to work, to get on the book. And then, of course, it was the middle of this very strange election campaign. So it was not easy. I mean, you saw and heard a lot of Kamala in public domain or through television and social media. But attending in-person events or meeting people in person, people around her in person, was impossible. So yeah, it was a tough writing experience, but I enjoyed it. Eventually, I'm happy that I managed to swing it.
Definitely shows, that you did have a nice time writing, because you just take us off on this journey of all these people and places and events and how it all came together, and then how that ties up with Kamala Harris and her growth. Those are really fascinating parts of the book. Is there any part that you think is your favorite in the book, and you would like to read a page of it for us? If anything, that I know you wrote everything in the book, and the whole book is.
I don't know whether a page would capture it, but I was particularly fascinated by her mother and her mother's journey. To me, that was. I mean, the book is about Kamala Harris, but there are 2 chapters on her mother, and I found, in fact, some people suggested that she's the real phenomenal woman, not Kamala Harris. But the title, I think, as I explained to you, is taken from a poem by Maya Angelou, and it's a celebration of women and their, coming up and their rise. In fact, the other Maya Angelou poem, which I considered using as a title, is called "Still I Rise," which is also a celebration of women and womanhood. So yeah, I mean, her mother is a fascinating character, and I'm happy to read a page.
Please.
A chapter called "Mommy Dearest," which is her mother. She called her mother Mommy. So Shyamala Gopalan Harris gave birth to Kamala while writing and researching her PhD at the Kaiser Foundation Hospital in Oakland, California, on Tuesday, 20th October 1964. It was a year in which Lisa, Mary, Susan, and Karen are listed as the most popular female baby names. Shyamala decided to name her daughter Kamala, which stands for lotus flower in Sanskrit. The lotus also represents the goddess Lakshmi, who symbolizes wealth in Indic culture. On The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Kamala would later talk about how a person's name is the first gift their family can give them, informed by tradition and love, and the hopes and aspirations the family has for that child. Lotus also symbolizes purity and resilience. Despite growing in water and slush, it remains unaffected and dry as the water simply slide off its leaves. An equivalent quality would come in handy for Kamala when the mudslinging began in her many election campaigns, peaking in the run-up to 3rd November 2020. Although Donald Harris and his Black Caribbean experience were significant factors in her life, the Indian influence remained strong in Kamala. A culture that worships goddesses produces strong women. Shyamala once told LA Times, explaining that she gave her daughters names derived from Indian mythology in part to help preserve their cultural identity. In fact, Shyamala's younger daughter Maya continued the tradition, naming her daughter Meenakshi, a Tamil Sanskrit term meaning fish-eyed, derived from the words mean, fish, and akshi, eyes. Meena's daughters are Shyamala's great-granddaughters. Donald was no stranger to Indian culture either. This is Donald Harris, not Trump. Donald Harris was no stranger to Indian culture either. After Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, his native Jamaica has the third largest Indo-Caribbean population in the West Indies. On her birth certificate, Kamala's middle name is listed as Iyer, Kamala Iyer Harris. Her parents filed an affidavit to correct the record, changing her middle name to Devi. She carries the name to this day, signing off as KDH in shorthand. On each occasion she has been sworn into office, including as vice president, she has taken oath with her full name, Kamala Devi Harris.
So that was wonderful. Thank you very much for reading that for us. That was Shyamala Harris. You do speak at length about her, and also a lot of the other interesting women in Kamala's life come and served. Some of them as inspiration, some of them as direct support. And it also becomes apparent that it is that support system that actually made the person that she is. The environment growing up, it could be either in Berkeley or then at Howard, DCM, then even those few years in Canada at McGill University that you talk about.
Yeah.
So it's a very fascinating book. And if you want to, you did mention when we met that you want the women to read this book mainly. This serves as an inspiration to women.
Want everyone to read it, but yes,
read it.
Women, yeah.
But I think who should read it is people who disagree with Kamala or have reasons to disagree with her.
Well, absolutely, everybody.
Everybody. So because it's that it's very easy to assume that Chidu, the progressive writer, he's going to obviously say only the nice things about Kamala. But in this book, you haven't really, glorified anything here. There's no mindless glorification of anything. It's just a statement of facts. And where there have been her failings, you have mentioned that too. It's not that you've carefully weeded out the failings of her and glorified only her successes or perceived successes, but it's a very good statement of facts. In that sense, I should say this is a journalistic piece of work, that way, very neutral.
Yeah, because, look, we have to understand that she's also, she's a work in progress. It's an incomplete career, right? In fact, her Senate career itself was, like I said, short, 4 years. She didn't even complete her full term before she pitched into the presidential election. And then, her vice presidency is less than a year old. History will record or decide whether she's successful, unsuccessful, or what was her level of success. It's way, way too early in her political career. So yeah, I've tried to stay with facts and assess her career so far.
Okay, so how has the reaction been to the book?
Good so far. I'm happy. The reviews are just starting to come in. The book has just been published. In fact, the US hardcover is still due. It's available on Kindle, but the hardcover releases in January. So yeah, we'll wait.
Has the vice president read it yet?
I have no idea. In fact, I just gave a copy to her uncle Bala. But I have no idea whether she's read it or she has a lot on her plate. I can understand.
I'm pretty sure she's going to get the copy.
She's probably reading files on immigration and voting rights,
okay,
and various bills in Congress.
So Chidu, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And as you asked me or commanded me, I'm going to write a review as well. And share it with you. Yeah, and yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure chatting with you again, like always. And
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
look forward to talking to you again soon, and probably about another book, your fourth one.
Sure. Maybe your book next time.
Oh, that would be great. Of course, it would be a shame because being in your company, if I don't write a book, it's a shame.
Do it. You'll do it. You're there.
All right. Thank you, and you have a good day.